build systems and hire a team to be able to run the business so that if I wanted to go on vacation or I got sick or I just needed a day, that the business would continue operating without me. And, it took a little while, but it was well worth it.
Welcome to The Foundry, where leaders are forged daily. Each week, we investigate themes of leadership, entrepreneurship, and mindset with some of the greatest minds in real estate. And now, the data scientist of real estate, George Roberts.
Welcome back, investors. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Ed Mathews, founder of Clark Street Capital. He is a former Silicon Valley executive turned real estate entrepreneur, and he went full-time in 2018 and has been focused on multifamily real estate ever since. He is the host of the Real Estate Underground podcast, and we are happy to have him here today. Welcome to the show, Ed.
Thank you. How are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, I'm doing fabulous. Thanks for asking. Most people don't ask me, and we just barrel into it. But
right.
It's always good to have some momentum. And I want to ask you, first of all, about personal branding and rebranding. Sure. So you obviously had a very high-powered career. Take us back, you're a Silicon Valley executive, and now you found amazing opportunities in real estate. So how did you rebrand yourself, and what were you able to repurpose from career one as you went into career two?
Yeah, great question. So I loved everything about working for, small to mid-sized startups. Every day was different. And I've discovered over my years that I have a profound case of entrepreneurial ADD. So I kind of thrive in those situations where every day is a new curveball. It was a tremendous opportunity, a whole bunch of companies that most people haven't heard of, 𝐄𝐝, 𝐟𝐨𝐫, but DocuSign you probably heard of. That was the last one I was with. And I use it every day.
I use it too.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
A lot of people in real estate use it. It's a great tool. I love it.
As a current shareholder, I'm grateful. Thank you. So the challenge with, managing a career like that. And so I spent a ton of time in sales, ton of time doing marketing, and eventually got into operations and management. And so, in terms of the career, amazing. I get to meet just heavy hitter after heavy hitter. And that was really interesting and a lot of fun getting to learn from those, that type of person. But the challenge of it is that I have two now, a 20-year-old and a 15-year-old daughters, and a wife who actually still likes me, and I still like her a whole lot. And but I was traveling, 150 to 200 nights a year, and so it's really hard to be, an influencer, to have an impact on your children's lives from a Courtyard Marriott somewhere out in the Midwest.
Absolutely. I guess the new career helps with that too, right? Because there is an appropriate amount of distance, right? You want to be close, but not too close.
Yeah. I have an office condo where I'm sitting right now, which is about 5 miles from my house. So it's, that 5-minute ride lets me gear up in the morning and decompress at night. And so I get to leave the job at the proverbial office, literally. And that's nice because that allows me to be present. So to answer the second half of your question, I got into real estate as a passion. I think my story is semi-typical in that I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the Purple Bible, and it fundamentally changed my life in terms of my view of what my future entrepreneurial endeavors would look like. And real estate was something that I knew quite well. When I was younger, my father was a carpenter, and I learned some of those skills holding his hammer. But the other part of it, I worked construction as a teenager, and really just kind of fell in love with the whole process. When I read Rich Dad, it took me, quite frankly, about 3 years to kind of overcome the fear of signing on the dotted line and managing properties. But I finally did that in 2011, and then went full time in 2018. At the point where, one, my travel was getting very difficult, and two, the income from our multifamily portfolio surpassed what I was making in terms of salary and compensation for my corporate world. So
yeah,
I jumped off.
I like that. And that's harder, of course, when you are an executive. It's easier when you're an hourly employee to say, hey, I've surpassed my income. Let's quit. Let's move on. But I also want to zero in a little bit on, you went from a very entrepreneurial background into real estate, and obviously a lot of parallels there. I mean, every time
Absolutely.
you get a new building, right, that's a new LLC, it's a new business plan. And
Right.
I think that a lot of people, I mean, I have the same thing. I never worked at a startup. It was one of my great desires, unfulfilled, but I can see how that would be similar. And I just feel like everybody, you got to look at your personal history, and you may think, hey, you know, my personal history just doesn't perfectly support real estate. How am I going to do this? It's totally different. But guess what? If you look at it from the right perspective, you're going to find that you have something that you can call out from that past that's just perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the fundamentally, and I'm, you know, a firm believer in the fact that we're in the marketing business, right? You know, it's like the old Ray Kroc story, you know, when he met with the Harvard B School kids. He was speaking at Harvard at one point, and he asked the group, you know, what business am I in? And they said, well, you're in the quick serve business or the fast food business or whatever. And, you know, he corrected them and said, no, that's our product, but I'm actually in the real estate business, right? And so, you know, what you see from the outside is not necessarily how you execute internally in your operation. You know, real estate, yes, our product is that we deliver really clean, safe, and well-appointed housing for folks that live in C and now B class buildings. And we serve the living daylights out of them, and hopefully they stay for a really long time. But the fact is that from nothing happens until we create awareness with our building owners, the brokers and agents that we deal with, our lenders, as well as, frankly, the investors, right? And so, you know, this is a huge marketing effort that begets, you know, the product, which is housing, right?
Right. I'm hearing marketing, or you're saying marketing, but I'm hearing service. You see a huge aspect of that as being serving the people who live in your buildings.
Yeah, twofold, right? I like sleeping at night, so I need to know that I'm doing right by the folks that live in our buildings. It's a lot of responsibility. But the second part of it is it's also good business, right? Because, you know, the tenancy, average tenancy, I'm in Connecticut. The average tenancy here, I think, is like somewhere in the ballpark of 16 months, which means just about every year and a half, you're moving. That's a lot of moving, right? And, you know, so our goal was, George, I know you know this very well, as does your audience, that vacancy is really expensive and turnover is really expensive. And so, you know, in addition to doing the right thing, it's also, you know, by serving them, when something breaks, we fix it. When they have a question, we answer it. We always follow up. We always do what we say we're going to do. Please and thank you are in every sentence we use. Yes, sir. And yes, ma'am. And it's my pleasure. I know
I was just about to mention Chick-fil-A because I want to say they are some of the best people at doing that.
And I learned without a doubt. But here's the thing, you know, by doing that, in a lot of cases, we're buying properties, you know, especially the value added ones, where there's a breakdown in the relationship between the resident and the property owner, the property management company. And so part of our effort when we go in to do our pass of clean and safe is to rebuild the relationship, or at least start that process, because we want them to stay. I mean, the fact is that our residents typically stay, you know, we just snapped a line and did it again, measured it about a month ago. And that, you know, our average tenancy in our world is about 3.6 years. And that includes Class C and Class B buildings. So, you know, I think that's when we're doubling up what local tenancy rates are, we're doing pretty well. And, you know, the good news is that the reason that it's better, you know, better business is because in those 3.5 years, obviously we're providing them basically a brand new unit when they move in, but we don't have turnover. So, you know, the cost of the vacancy, the cost of freshening up a unit, the cost of leasing that unit one more time, we save all of that for, you know, 3, almost 4 years now. So it makes our business a lot more profitable.
Yeah, outstanding. And what are you doing in addition to just giving great customer service? Is there anything else like community days? What do you do to build that community that wants to live there 2, 3, 4 years?
So this is a people business, right? And so we are, you know, first and foremost, me as the principal, I'm present, right? They know who I am. And, and in fact, in the early days, although we're getting to the point where I can't do this as often as I'd like, I used to door knock every door and, introduce myself as the person that owns the building. And, I had a whole bunch of my friends like, oh my God, don't do that. Don't do that. Because then they'll call you. And I said, no, I want them to call me. It's okay. And, and then we just train them on how best to get served. Right. And, calling my cell phone is a decent way to get a hold of us. But if you actually call our customer service folks, you're going to get help immediately. But the fact is that, I recognized early on that, that relationship needed to be shared or repaired. So, first step is clean and safe. So we go in and make sure that all the mechanicals are operating properly and that, there are no issues. And you'd be surprised, maybe not, but we find a lot of issues. And we immediately upgrade all of the common areas. And, we communicate and we document everything so they understand, hey, new sheriff in town, and we actually care about their satisfaction. And then it comes down to a people business. We don't necessarily, so a lot of our multis are in that, I'm coining a phrase from my friend Margaret Kozlark, micro family, right? So it's that 6 unit to 20-ish unit building. That's where most of our buildings fall. And so, we've done, things around the holidays, and I've been asked to dress up like Santa Claus, and I haven't said yes to that yet. But we've certainly, we go out of our way to make, that time of year a whole lot of fun. At one of the buildings, one of the residents had asked, can we do a Halloween parade? Like, absolutely, of course you can. And the only thing I ask is that you let me come and hand out candy. And they were like, absolutely. So, me and a couple of folks from my team were out there handing out candy, and it was a whole lot of fun. So there's certain things that we do, but not like, with the much larger communities that you're probably familiar with.
Got it. Yeah. Well, I love it. There's no gimmick there. It's just caring about people. But one thing I'm really hearing really strong in that story is the door knocking. It seems like every landlord says, don't let them know you're the landlord. Right. Hey, we're just here to do an inspection or whatever, Nobody says, hey, I'm a landlord. So I love that. And very, very good. I think there's a lot. If you get one thing out of this podcast, I think that could be worth your entire hour.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty easy to figure out who I am. I'm not a small person. I'm, 6'4" and rather imposing. So I don't blend very well with other human beings. And my face is all over the website and social media. So if, all you have to do is Google Clark Street and you're going to see my face everywhere. So it's kind of hard to hide. So I might as well just be upfront about it.
Yeah. Awesome. Now I wonder, with all that background, you mentioned having shares, do you do angel investing, or was that all as a matter of being an executive at these companies?
So no, I was not an angel investor in any of the companies I worked for. I have invested in early stage companies, round A and angel fund at times. I don't have any investments in technology at the moment, but I'm always looking. And
well, yeah, I love it. And it's I think it's very important, because one of the things I want to introduce my investors to, or my listeners here, is there is a real wealth of alternative investments. Indeed. Syndications are a great way to go. Hey, that's what I do. We're going to talk about your fund in a moment, which is another way. It's similar to syndications, a similar way of getting into a large commercial investment. And yeah, there's all kinds of things. Private equity. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, just take a look out there and don't limit yourself to stocks and bonds. I hope that's not what you're doing. And if you are, just realize that you have your whole life ahead of you. And even I mean, I'm learning things all the time. Sometimes I invite people on the show just because I like their asset class and I'm trying to get into it. So,
right. Yeah. It's the cool part about hosting a podcast is that you control who you talk to, which is wonderful. Right.
It is. So okay. So we were going to mention that podcast in any event. So let's do it now since you brought it up. So you are the host of the Real Estate Underground podcast. I watched it. It's an amazing show. I think there's so much to learn there. Why don't you lay it out for us? What makes your show different? Who are you trying to connect with?
So this podcast started off a little bit selfishly in that one of the things that I really enjoy doing is coaching and mentoring folks. And I was a partner at the local RIA, and that part of it was, absolutely amazing. I loved every minute of it. And then I decided to leave so I could focus on just this business. Again, entrepreneurial ADD. I've got a, stay away from the shiny objects. But so Real Estate Underground kind of scratches that itch. It's educational in content and format. My job is to interview, and George, you were kind enough to be on the show. Thank you again.
Yes, looking forward to seeing that come out. Should be fun.
It's coming out. I think you're about 2 weeks away. And so the fact is what I'm looking to do is interview people who are smarter than me and ask them a whole bunch of loaded questions about how they got where they are, the mistakes they've made, the successes they've had, why they do it the way they do it, because everybody's different. And, George, like you, I treat it as if, okay, you as the guest are going to teach me, the host, and
right.
by indirectly, the audience on, how do you start, grow, and then ultimately scale a successful real estate business. And, I look at different asset classes as well. We've had industrial investors, we've had commercial retail investors. I've interviewed a couple of folks that do land investing, land flipping, house flippers, but predominantly we talk multifamily. And so it's, I'm very focused on best practices and how you put systems in place. And because, the only way, like, for instance, when I left corporate America, I had a side hustle. It wasn't really a business. If I stopped doing what I was doing every day, everything stopped.
Yeah.
And so, part of the mission that first year and a half was to build systems and hire a team to be able to run the business so that if I wanted to go on vacation, or I got sick, or I just needed a day, that the business would continue operating without me. And, it took a little while, but it was well worth it. And so, I try to share a lot of those experiences with the audience on the podcast as well.
Yeah, outstanding. And if anybody's wondering, why am I chuckling? Well, Ed is talking about asking loaded questions. I know exactly why, because I'm doing the same thing over here. I'm plugging everybody for information, because I know every one of these guests, even if we are very much in the similar business like multifamily, I learn at least one amazing nugget from each guest. And I think you're going to get 5 or 6. We're only a few minutes into this interview, maybe a couple dozen today from Ed. So
high bar, George. I'll do my best.
well, I'm going to do my best to make it easy, because I've got a lot of great questions for you and have been following your career. Now, you also mentioned about connecting with people.
Yeah.
And I'd like to know, you connect with people through your podcast. That's a segue I was looking for. Yeah. But I want to know, who'd you like to connect with today through this podcast appearance? So what are you looking for mainly? Are you looking for passive investors, deal finders, capital raisers, KPs? Like, who are you looking to reach out to? Who can you help, and who can help you?
So I think our constituencies are, 2 main groups of people. One are real estate investors themselves. Like I said, helping other people get where they want to go is something that really juices me up, and I thoroughly enjoy that. And it's why I'm on this show. It's why I do my show. The other part of it is investors. And, I'm always looking to meet with folks who are looking to get off the roller coaster of the stock and bond market, or at least diversify a little bit out of it. And, my job is to, as a sponsor, is to understand kind of where they are in their financial and life journey and where they're trying to go. And as projects come up, and we have, very different projects, from C-class value add to B-class, light touch value add, to now we've gotten into development. And they're not the same, and they're not for everybody, right? And so, my job is to understand kind of where you are and where you're trying to get, and then figure out how we can add value and help you get a little further towards your goal.
That's outstanding. Now, you mentioned some active investors there. Are you doing any active mentoring, or is this more of an informal thing where you're talking to people and trying to help them? Or are you talking just in terms of getting you to where you want to be to your financial goals?
Great question. So as far as formal, I do not have a formal coaching program at this point, at least. I do have, a couple of dozen folks that I've met over the years who either on LinkedIn or Twitter or through 𝐶𝐸 or somewhere else have kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, help me. And, I was blessed with, 5 or 6 really amazing mentors over the course of my career, and both in real estate and in the business world. And so they didn't want anything from me. They were doing it because they either took pity on me, or they saw something that in me, and they wanted to embrace that. And I'm grateful And, the most any of them would ever let me do is buy them breakfast. So a cup of coffee. So, the way that I give back is by doing this stuff. And yeah.
Yeah, a lot of lessons in there. And I think the first is that this is a real pay it forward industry. So if you happen to be a little bit newer and you're wondering, hey, should I reach out? Just reach out. Right. And you also mentioned about limited partners coming into your deals. Yeah. That's very important. If you're an active investor out there and you're just thinking like, I do it myself, I'm not a limited partner, try it. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. You're going to learn. And if you think that I learn a lot from speaking to a great operator like Ed Mathews for an hour, I do. But if I come into a deal, now that's a much deeper conversation. And I've learned something from every operator that I've gone into a deal. You also mentioned reach out because you got different types of deals.
Right.
That's huge. I don't want that to be lost, because if you are a limited partner, you're thinking about becoming a limited partner, how do I know that the deal that I need to be in doesn't just happen to be the one that's coming up this week? If I don't call you, right. And you've mentioned many things. I know we got a lot of tech people here. You mentioned development. So you want to clarify, we're not talking about writing code here, right?
Correct. We're talking about ground up building.
Exactly. And that's totally different than investing in, say, a C class, trying to turn it into a C plus or a B minus.
Right.
It's very different than investing in a B and doing an operations play. And depending on where you are, that may or may not be appropriate. I mean, I certainly, for my own money, I have some things that are in some riskier things like development. I have some value adds, both my own and investing in others, but I also need cash flow. And so I don't invest everything in early stage companies and private equity and then not eat for the next 5 years.
Right.
So it matters the sort of person you are and also what sort of things you've got to balance. So yeah, definitely reach out. And I mean, the worst case is that you reach out to somebody, you learn a little bit about another human being and their business plan.
Yeah. And, the good news, and George, this is how you and I met, right? I mean, on LinkedIn and Twitter and just, in meetup groups and all that, we meet, you and I and other people like us, we meet a lot of really talented, conscientious, aggressive, smart people, right? Yeah. And so if, George, if you were contemplating, or if you had come to me and said, hey, I've got, a block of capital that I'm looking to deploy and I don't want to put it in the stock market, I'm looking to look at, some form of real estate, projects that we have on the table may not be appropriate. But, part of my job is to keep my ear to the ground and find out what everybody else is doing as well. Because if I have someone that comes to me and is looking to deploy capital, and I don't have a project that fits their goals, I'm happy to introduce them to somebody else that I know that, is a better fit for what they're looking to do. And, it's the old Zig Ziglar thing, right? If you help enough people get where they want to go, then eventually they'll help you get where you want to go. As a 53-year-old real estate investor, I can guarantee you that is true.
Well, I love that. And I love that connector role. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I know we met on LinkedIn. Was it through Yona's challenge?
It was, as a matter of fact, the LinkedIn challenge. Exactly.
And so, yeah, 𝐿 Weiss is great. I guess I can deliver a little plug from him because, I mean, hasn't he helped so many people? So be good and right and appropriate to say, if you do get a chance to go into Yona's challenge, you might meet somebody amazing like Ed. And the next thing you know, another 6 months or a year later, you're connecting again on a deeper level. Yeah, it's an amazing, amazing thing. Anything else you want to say about connecting? I guess you said a lot already. I mean, that you can get anything you want if you help enough people get what they're looking for.
Yeah, I think, there's service and then there's contribution, right? And, service is what we do for our residents, serving them. If they need help, we help them. If they have a question, we answer it. And if we don't know the answer, we find out. And, but then there's, contribution. And I think that one of the goals that I had set for myself over the last few years is, I want to help other people get to their dream, whatever that is. And some I can help and some I can't. And so, all of the things that we do here at Clark Street and on the podcast, Real Estate Underground podcast, is focused around that single premise of helping, contributing to our community and doing it in a way that we share experiences and cautionary tales and war stories and success stories and all that. And hopefully, over the course of time, the investors out there realize that one, we're a conscientious and conservative sponsor, and that we know what we're doing. And some of those people will decide that they at least want to, figure out if they like me and our team. And, then we build a relationship, and over the course of time, we earn the right to do business with them. And so, both on the mentoring side, where we're providing as much content as humanly possible, and the investor side, where we're, trying to be a good steward, that's what we're focused on.
All right, awesome. Well, I want to thank our listeners for joining us for Gray Shirt Day at the Foundry. Before we go into part 2, which is going to be really exciting, we're going to talk about a lot of amazing things, including we're going to go really deep with Ed's approach to real estate, see if you can understand, get on board. Is this somebody maybe you want to work with? We're going to talk a lot more about entrepreneurship. And we're also going to talk about some mindset and about things that Ed is doing to help mentor younger investors. But before we go from part 1, before I let you go, I want to make sure everybody knows how to reach you. So just really briefly, if you want to reach out to Ed Mathews, Clark Street Capital, what do you do?
So the fastest way is through our website, clarkst.com. So clarkstreet.com. You can also call our office, 860-675-5800. And I am Ed Mathews on all of the, one of the other advantages to being in the tech world when they invented the internet, when Al Gore invented the internet, was that I actually got to use my real name in a lot of the social media channels, because there weren't a lot of people on them. There wasn't a lot of people on Facebook and Twitter when I was joining, right? And so I'm Ed Mathews pretty much everywhere, Ed Mathews 4 in a couple of places, and then Clark Street Capital on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, you name it.
Okay, outstanding. Thank you so much for taking your time to share your knowledge and experience with our audience.
Truly my pleasure, George. Good to see you.
All right.